Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of T.N.T Garage and Performance, and today we're bringing back Brute Farce. If you guys watched the channel before or seen this truck before, this is my 2000 Dodge Ram 3/4 ton with the 8-liter V10 that I picked up for next to nothing, then body swapped it because the old body you could stick your hand through, and started working on making it a good all-around truck. Now, today we're going to bring it to a whole nother level, and that's literally because we're going to be installing a leveling kit, new shocks, new tires, new exhaust, spark plugs, U-joints. We're going to be taking care of the cracked dash in this thing. This is a big project on this truck. I'm hoping to get it all done in one day. So let's check out the transformation as we go, so let's get to it. Well, here we go. Here's the truck as it sits. It needs a handful of things. The exhaust leaks on the passenger side. The flange is completely rotted out, so the downpipe isn't really staying on the manifold. That's irritating. It's too loud because the exhaust ends right there. It needs tires, kind of. I don't know what happened here. I know the truck's got a 410 and a posi and a V10, so I don't know how that happened, but we'll just we'll address that later. The front tires, well, they got bigger cracks in them than the Grand Canyon, so those need to be replaced. The track bar is loose, and I'll show you guys. I got a little video clip to demonstrate how to look for loose components in your front end if you're by yourself. So we need front tires, we need rear tires, so I picked these up. These, a lot of people might know the company is Thunderer. They're obviously a Asian brand, but these actually have been pretty good tires for everyone I know that uses them. They make the mud tracks, which are super popular, really aggressive tire. I decided to go with the Rangers, these all-terrains, so it'd be a little quieter on the road. Still have nice aggressive sidewall treatment. And these are 285 75/16s, the same size it's on it right now. Now we're going to do the exhaust also, which is a Flowmaster 50 series knockoff because I don't want it too loud. I'd like to have as good of a tone I can get out of a V10. And of course, dual exhaust out the back. We got the track bar. We got a 2.5-inch leveling kit along with these Rough Country shocks. Now, Rough Country has had a reputation of not being the greatest dampening when it comes to their shocks, but these new ones are leagues above anything you guys remember, like throwing on an old XJ or ZJ or something like that. You also got these split exhaust flanges to fix the leak up at the manifold. Got spark plugs on the bench. There's the tips for the exhaust, and mind the major mess that is my garage. We are currently getting to construction phase, and that wall will disappear. So whenever they decide to show up sometime this year, that'll be done. Also, we've got a new dash cover and bezel, so that'll clean up the dash because it is atrocious, and we'll show you that quick. It is not as bad as some of them, but bad enough. So, first things first, I need to pop the wheels and tires off of this, get them thrown in the back of the red Ram, and get them down, get them changed out while we're doing the rest of the work. Here's an easy way to check your front end for loose components if you're by yourself. First off, set your phone on the ground, pointing at your front suspension. Then just get in, fire the engine up, and move the wheel back and forth, saw it a little bit. As you can see while I'm doing this on this truck, the whole body of the truck's moving, and if you look where that's coming from, is the track bar is loose on its ball joint end, which shows us that it's bad. You can also find steering components that are loose like this, along with anything else that would move when you turn the wheels. Well, first things first, before we get running on taking care of the front suspension, I'm just going to shoot a little WD over each one of these plugs and let it soak in, because God knows that I really don't want to deal with the stuck plug. And the engine's still a little warm, so this should help draw it in. There we go. And of course, this side's going to be more fun, so get the air tube out of the way. There we go. That should help us there. Now, the first thing we're going to do is get set up and get this tower all taken apart. There's a shock bolt down here. Take the tower apart, pull the old shock out, and we can start putting a leveling kit on. Also, too, I realized I need a sway bar end link, because this one is, well, it's one of those off-road ones, so it's quick disconnects, except it's always disconnect. But that's actually a good thing right now, because whenever you do this, you want to disconnect your sway bar so you can move the axle around. Alright, well, it's safe to say this is a little rusty, and we're probably going to end up fighting getting these nuts off of the coil spring isolator. So just find a size that knocks the rust off, because I don't remember what these are actually supposed to be. Definitely not an 18. Oh, maybe. Might attack these with a death wheel, to be honest. Just because I'm going to be here all day. These are so rusty that it's not going to go the way I want it to. So we'll get the death wheel in here and just take them off. There we go. Well, we got all the bolts loose up here in the shock mount. We've got the bolt, which is a 13/16 bolt that goes right under the spring mount and through the shock. Now, something old like this, the shock is bound to be stuck in its lower mount, which this one is. There we go. Kind of ripped a hole in the shock. Thankfully, we're replacing it. We got it loose, and on this side, the master is actually in a way to be able to pull a shock mount and the shock at the same time. So we'll just go to the top, take the nut off the top of the shock stud, and separate the mount from the old shock. But then we can get to working on jamming in the leveling kit with new shocks and everything. Get this thing up where it belongs. Well, we got everything out of there. Did plenty of rust removal in the process. And the next thing I'm going to do is, since we're replacing the track bar anyway, I'm going to unbolt the track bar from this side, and that'll let the axle drop more. If you're ever trying to pull your springs out or something, you pretty much got to disconnect just about everything. Your sway bar end links and your track bar, because you may not think the track bar limits the droop of the axle, but it actually does. So let's get that popped off quick. It's probably a 13/16 or 7/8 nut, and then we'll get the other side taken apart, and we'll check back in with you when we're getting ready to reassemble. Okay, well now it's time to install our leveling kit. And all this is a 2.5 inch spacer that locates the coil spring on the bottom and bolts in the factory location for your shock mount, your upper shock mount. So they provide you with hardware. This is just some off of Amazon kit, nothing special. But they provide you hardware so you can run these bolts right up inside there. So there's a couple ways you could do this to hold them in place while you're doing all this. One of which is silicone, which is what I'll do because these are just going to flop around. Because obviously you have to get this in here, get the spring in, and then get the shock in. So let's get this thing assembled for the most part. Well, after a bit of struggling, I got the spring back in. My recommendation here is go ahead and rent yourself a spring compressor. It could either be an inside compressor or the outer compressors, which you need 2 of them. I did it in such a way that I really don't want to show it on video because it's not safe, but it got it done. And you know, I don't want to encourage anyone to repeat what I did to get this spring in here. But next step is drop the shock in and put the upper mount on. So let's get walking through that. So of course the first step is we're going to drop in our new shock from the top. Now that we got our shock dropped in and the bolt through, these rams run what's called a flag nut. This is the nut for the backside of your shock bolt. And a lot of times they fall right out or they fall down above the lower control arm. Just take it, what I do is I just hold it in here and get it started. And that'll pull it in and it won't go anywhere and it'll be able to tighten up. There we go. And of course, after we get this all assembled, go back through and do a nut and bolt check. So now it's time to put our upper mount on. The rearmost bolt, it's kind of a pain when you're putting these spacers in. You pretty much got to reach in between here, unless you have the spring compressed, and get the bolt pushed up through and make sure you can hold it in. These outer ones, not bad to do at all. So now we can go ahead and start out with our shock hardware, which is our bushings and the spacers. So when you are putting your bushings in, you'll see that the hole in here is bigger than the shock stud itself. So these are stepped and they're meant to sit in there. So remember that when you're putting your shocks together. So our upper one is going to go on top of the shock. Grab the right spacer here. There we go. And then putting our step up because it's going into the bottom of the shock mount. Just like that. And then these will go on after we get the shock mount set into place. And I'm going to start by putting a nut on that rear one that was the most pain, because if I move it and it falls out, I'm probably going to start cussing a lot. And, you know, we want to be nice to everyone watching here. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a nut on there. There we go. So what I'm going to wait to do is to get all the weight back on the wheels once I pick up the wheels and tires, and we can go ahead and tighten all this down, and it won't bind or anything. Granted, you won't have a binding problem up here. I just want the axle swung in the position where it's supposed to be, because as 4 links drop down, they also pull backwards towards the back of the body. So once you get the weight on it, everything will be lined up perfect. So when you tighten it down, you're not going to have any issues. So I'm going to put the upper bushing and nut on the shock and get the other side assembled. And we will actually move on to a couple other things while I'm waiting for the wheels and tires. And then we can come back to this and tighten everything up. Alright, we got the suspension buttoned up as far as the leveling kit, new shocks. One tip for getting this shock bolt out on the passenger side is turn the steering wheel all the way to the driver's side, and the linkage will clear and you can get at it easily with a socket and an extension. So now it's just a matter of getting this track bar bolt out. Now hopefully it's not stuck in the bushing and it doesn't break the flag nut. So it's obviously rusted a little smaller, so I'm going to try putting an 18 on there and see if we can get the track bar bolt out of the way. That might do it. Now that is a lot of luck that this did not seize in the bushing of the track bar. Now, just like the shocks, you got a flag nut that goes up in the pocket in front of the axle tube and behind the track bar mount. So just set those aside and then work the track bar out. It's an old rusty plow truck, but no sense in throwing it away just because there's some rust on it. There we go. And clear our end. And there we go. There's the old track bar, and this end, this tie rod style end, ball tight end, is absolutely shot, as you guys see in the video. So let's grab the new one and get it set into place. There we go. Nice new unit, new castle nut. We'll set that over there. Comes with a grease zerk that you put into this end. Now when you're doing a track bar on anything with a 4-link or anything like that that's a parallel link suspension, I'm just going to say it's easier this way, don't just lift the body and let the axle droop, because the track bar is going to want to pull it one way or another and you'll have a lot harder time getting a new one in. So I always put the weight on the axle of the vehicle, so that way you could just move the body instead of trying to pull the axle. So we'll get this up and in, and then your ball joint end should be able to slide right up into its home once you get this driven in far enough. There we go. See, that's a lot easier than trying to move the axle. If you have the weight on the vehicle on the axle, it makes this so much easier. Get my castle nut started. And let's see where we're at. On this side, we're almost perfectly lined up. And what happens, and why it's harder if you let the axle hang free, is that the track bar, as it drops, is going to want to pull the axle to the driver's side. As it comes up to level, it's going to push it back to the passenger side. So having all the weight of the vehicle on it and pretty much just leaving it be, it won't be that hard to line it up just like this. And I'll show you just how gravy this really is. I didn't have to fight anything, so that's the advantage of doing it that way. So I'm going to run the bolt in far enough to where I can get my flag nut on and then tighten this side up, and we can tighten the ball joint end up, and we're already done with the track bar. So that little tip will help you save a ton of time on your own truck or your Jeep or anything that runs a link style coil spring front suspension like this. And there we go. Track bar is tight on this side. We'll move around to the castle nut, and we're pretty much done with the front suspension, and now we can move on to other stuff. So let's tighten this side up and get out from underneath this part of the truck. All right, so on this Dodge and all second gens like this, it's a ball joint end on the driver's side that comes up through the mount. You tighten it down. XJ Jeeps, TJ Wranglers, ZJ Grand Cherokees are all the same way, except on the Jeeps you can unbolt the track bar mount, put a dual shear one in. So this one's welded to the frame. You can change it, but yeah, as cheap as these track bars are anymore, it's not too bad to change them. As long as you kind of do it the way that I recommend, it makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to tighten that up a little more so we can throw our cotter key through, put the grease zerk in the bottom, and we're done, other than greasing the front end. So if I can hold on to them. There we go. And all that's left is to throw the grease zerk in. But other than that, I will order some sway bar end links, get that zapped up in the future. Right now I'm not concerned about it. The truck doesn't turn as well, but it's not a race car. They didn't have sway bars back in the day. It'll live without it for now. But we can continue on. I think I'm going to move to the exhaust next and get that wrapped up. Well, we got our front end buttoned up on both sides. You can see new shocks are in. We have our spacers in to provide the leveling kit. And off camera, I had received my new sway bar end links, so I went ahead, threw them in there because this one was completely broken. And it's just nice on a truck this big to have a little sway control and just control in general over the front of this truck. Now, before I get too carried away, I'm going to show you guys how to check ball joints on anything with a solid front axle like this. You can't really get a feel for it unless the top ball joint, the upper ball joint's really bad by moving the wheel, because just the geometry of where the ball joints lay. So I'm going to show you guys what I've done for a couple of decades to check to see if I got bad ball joints on one of these, like a Jeep, a Ford, a Dodge like this. So get a good look at the ball joints, get the front end jacked up, get the tire just enough off the ground that you got a bar that can fit under there. So just go ahead and pull up on the bar under the tire with a little bit of strength there. And as you lift it, if your ball joints are loose, you'll actually see the spindle move, or you'll hear a clunk. And on this side, them ball joints are tight. So that's actually pretty good news. So we'll check the other side quick, and then we'll get this back on the ground. Well, same thing on this side. Go ahead, get your jack under the axle, and get ourselves a gap here that I can get my bar underneath. There we go. Grab my bar. Under the tire. And now we're also gonna look and listen if there's clunks. Hear how there's a little bit of a clunk there? Now it's hard to see. We'll get a better look in here. I can feel it, but there's really not a whole load of play in the ball joints. So there's enough of a clunk that would tell me that the ball joints are definitely on their way out. They're just not completely shot yet. They're not trashed. So I could see just the slightest bit of movement, maybe a couple thousandths up top, that this one's actually moving in a bit. Because if your lower ball joint's good and your upper ball joint's bad, the wheel's actually going to tip in as you lever it, telling you that this upper one's bad. And it's really not moving in. It's kind of going at an angle, just a couple thousandths. So the lower one's not moving. And of course, when you're going to do ball joints, just replace all of them. There's no sense taking this all apart just to do one. So that'll be on a future list. Probably going to have to put ball joints in this thing, which is fine. It's got almost 200,000 miles on the chassis. Probably time for ball joints. But there's a quick way to check your truck, anything with a solid front end, if you got bad ball joints. This will also work to an extent on something with independent front suspension, but those, usually I just take a big channel locks and squeeze the spindle and the control arm to see if there's play in the ball joints. So there you go. There's a quick tip on checking your front end. Well, we got the front end pretty much wrapped up on this truck. We did check the ball joints, which you just seen, and they're not bad. The passenger side upper is definitely going to get worse and go bad in, months, weeks, who knows. It's not a right now immediately need to fix. It's not enough that it's throwing the actual camber off, which is the tilt in and out of your tire. It's not that bad to where we're going to wear tires or have anything dangerous going on. So that'll be a future project when I have a few other things to add to a day's worth of work. So one thing, whenever you're lifting the front of a vehicle, no matter what it is, whether it's solid axle or independent front suspension, you're obviously going to want to get it aligned. Now, with a solid axle, you can get by with just setting the toe after you lift it, but understand that anytime you have a link system like this, a 4-link or even a 3-link or just single trailing arms on each side, whenever you drop the center line of the axle with a static distance between the mounting points, it's going to move the axle backwards in the wheel well just a little bit. That's not so much of a concern. The real concern is it actually effectively makes this link shorter. So what it does, when you're looking at your caster angle, when you're looking at your spindle, it actually brings it more to a negative caster, which when it comes to caster on anything, what it really affects is the more negative caster you have, the quicker it's going to want to turn whatever direction you turn the steering wheel, which some guys take caster away to do a lot of roundy round or a lot of turning just so it snaps in, on your initial steering into a corner. But when you got something that you want to drive down the road, you want to have positive caster, which if you look at your spindle is leaned back, with that obviously being a relation of the front of the vehicle. And how that's adjusted on something like this or a Jeep is right down here on your lower control arm bolt, and these are really rusty. You see that circle with a line in it. That's actually not just a washer, that's your eccentric to adjust your caster. So if you loosen the bolt and turn that whole unit, it'll actually push the axle forward or backwards. So if we turned it counterclockwise, that eccentric would come down into its groove and push the axle forward. And that's how you regain your caster. Now with stock suspension components like this would be about the max I would go without replacing the control arms, because there's only so much adjustment there, whereas an aftermarket control arm would have an adjustment in it, would, like a tubular control arm would have a threaded end with a heim joint that you could actually lengthen or shorten the control arm quite a bit more. But 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches is the most I would go on stock components. So that's one thing you definitely want to address. I will get this truck aligned, but I'm actually gonna wait a little bit, do the ball joints. I'm just gonna throw new steering components at it anyway, even though they're fine. I just want stuff that's greasable. So we'll do the ball joints, we'll throw the steering components at it, we'll clean those up so we can actually adjust them, and then we'll get this aligned and it'll drive perfect. So that's just a little bit of information of what you want to do whenever you're lifting a vehicle like this. And of course, stock control arms aren't real strong, so you don't want to wheel it hard. And whenever you bring a more of an angle like this instead of stock, they're level, you're going to get more harshness and bumps into the rest of the vehicle, because the steeper angle you have here is, whenever you hit a bump, is pushing it up into the vehicle, because the axle is going to want to come back and underneath, that's stopping it. So you have that angle, it's directing the blows up into the vehicle, whereas if you had drop brackets or stock suspension height, it'd be level. So when you hit a bump, it just simply move up instead of pushing back. So we've talked about that on the gasser front suspension when I was setting that up. Same principle applies here and on Quadra-Link Jeeps. So that's pretty much it for the front suspension. Let's move on to some other stuff. Well, we're under the truck now, and the source of my exhaust leak is right here. Now, what I got to do, because these are so rusty, I'm just going to cut the bolts. Don't mind the expertly run brake line here. I'm going to cut those bolts because Dodge is better than GM at this. These are through bolts. They're not studs threaded into the manifold. So you have this issue. You just get up there, you cut the bolts, and well, you replace them. And I'm going to replace this flange because it's shot. So I'm going to get the grinder up there and cut that out. Well, we got the flange out, and you can see that thing is toast. There's no way that was going to be holding the downpipe up. You can see the old bolts are just up in there, and look at that. That's why I drive Dodges. Not that everything's perfect on them, but the one thing I hate doing the most, which is exhaust off the manifolds, it makes it a lot easier. So I'm gonna cut this off. We're gonna drop that muffler off there. That's actually off my 17 Ram, and it's backwards. So we're gonna cut that, and then that'll free up this passenger side pipe. We can pull it down and make our repair. All right. Well, now we can get to repairing this. You can actually see that soot was where our leak is. So we've got our split flange on here, and we'll put it up there. But whenever I do an exhaust repair where the pipe meets the manifold, I always put some of this Permatex Ultra Copper on it. This is a high temp, basically made for exhaust, and it will help make a better seal so we don't have to do this again in the future. So I'm just going to put it up on the manifold and let it sit for a while before I jam this up on there. Alright, the next thing is to take this knockoff Blowmaster and weld these 2 1/4 inner diameter adapters on it, because the exhaust on a V10 Ram is 2 1/4 per bank, and this is a 2.5 inch inlet muffler because I have 2.5 inch tailpipes. So we're going to get these tacked on and get it slid onto the exhaust. Hopefully we'll have a much better sounding truck instead of a very unhappy goat. the exhaust in. I kind of blasted through that process because it was really hot and I had to take a lot of breaks, so it's kind of hard to film. But we got to cut back and we're going to get ready to throw these tips on. Now typically these would be a clamp on style tip, but just the way the exhaust fits and everything on this particular truck, I cut it back and we're going to weld them on. So we're going to kind of eyeball it where we want it. And we're going to throw a tack on there to hold it. Pretty good. So we're going to move to the other side, tack the other tip on, and probably move this back so we could weld everything, because this is really thin metal, you know, typical Amazon stuff, but we can get this straightened out the way we want it and go ahead and weld her in. Right about there. There we go. We got it tacked in. We've got them spaced at 1 3/8 inches on either side of the hitch. And as far as being level, they should be fairly close. I'm going to stand back and have a look at it before I final weld these. And I do know the bumper's not exactly straight on this truck, so that's why I'm going to be going by the hitch. Oh, there we go. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and finish welding those on, and I left the clamps on because they have the cutouts to clamp them. I'm actually going to use that to cover it because there's no way with my welder I could weld those shut without just burning right through them. So let's get them burnt in the rest of the way, and let's see how it sounds. Well, the last thing we're going to do to old Brute Farce in this episode is take care of this cracked, nasty dash. And the first step in doing that is we got to clean this thing up, get the dust and grease off of it, and then we can start prepping it to actually put a molded dash cover on it. So let's start out by getting some of this crud off here, and I'm just using spray weight glass cleaner. That should do the trick. Well, now the way I'm going to prep this dash to put the cover on is I have broken away a lot of the big pieces that were really loose, so we're not going to have them rattling under our new cover. There are a couple cracks here that could cause a rattle, so I'm going to take some of this supplied silicone adhesive and just kind of run it in the cracks to kind of bond it together so it doesn't move going down the road after our cover is in. So I'm just going to push down on the dash here and just kind of run this along the crack, and then just kind of let that set together. Just run the silicone into all these cracks here, so when the dash cover goes on top of it, it'll also push the silicone adhesive down into there and help keep it from rattling in the future. All right, well, here's our new dash skin. This is from Dash Skins, actually just Dash Skins, made in the USA, and pretty much all set. to drop on. Now I did test this for the fit before I went ahead and went through all this trouble of cleaning and laying down some silicone. So what we're going to do next is lay the silicone on the dash so we can get this fitted and stuck down. Well, now we could start laying our silicone adhesive. So we're going to want to get it down in the crevices and in these areas between the dash bezel and the airbag cover, as long as both sides of the dash as they curl down. So we're just gonna wheel it along. I'm just going to use some jack stands to press the dash into place. It's like that. Get my screw back in, and now we just let this set. It says to let it cure for 8 to 12 hours, so I'm going to leave these on, these weights pushing down on, for a few hours, and that should get us what we need to get it to set. So we'll check in on it in a bit. Well, we got our dual exhaust done. Sounded pretty good, as you just heard. I mean, for a V10. So one thing about a Dodge V10, seeing as it's an on fire, is you're never gonna make it sound really nice. I mean, it's got a good burble and idle. Anything above that sounds like hell, but it's a lot quieter than what it was. We've got off of the manifolds 2 glass packs into a 50 series knockoff muffler with dual outs. So it's tame enough. It makes just a little bit of noise, nothing too crazy, because I really don't want to hear this V10 just beller like a scalded goat. So, and it looks good. I mean, having a big 3/4 ton truck with dual exhaust out the back tells you a couple things. One, it's not a Cummins. 2, the way it sounds, it's definitely not a 360. So the only issue with the exhaust is I did fix the joint from the downpipe to the manifold, but we clearly have either a cracked manifold or a blown manifold gasket. I'm not going to address that right now. I'm going to wait till I have more time, and we're going to take this fender off to get at that. And if you guys want to see a video on the best way to take a manifold off of an old truck like this without a huge fight, go ahead and comment down below if you want to see that. So other than that, for an old work truck, it actually looks pretty decent. It drives nice. It looks way better with the front leveled out to match the rear. It's just a touchdown in the front, so when I hook a trailer to it, it's not going to be nose high. And it's got air conditioning. It's got cruise control. It's actually a pretty enjoyable truck to drive. So that being said, let's wrap up this video. Well, that brings us to the end of this project on Brute Farce. Now, there's a bit left to do. The bigger project's going to be fixing that exhaust manifold, taking care of the ball joints on the passenger side. I'll probably just end up doing all four, and I'm just going to replace all the steering components, because when I go to take it to get a line, I want everything to be perfect. The truck already drives really well, so it's not going to take much to get her absolutely perfect. There's no rear end noise, there's no front end noise. I replaced the U-joints. I mean, for what is it now, a 24-year-old truck, it holds up pretty good. And now I know a lot of you are thinking, why do you stick this much time, effort, little bit of money into a 3/4 ton gasser? Well, that's pretty simple. I mean, after all, real trucks have 10 spark plugs. But joking aside, the reason why I put the time into this is it doesn't matter how much fuel this uses, it will never eclipse the cost of the initial investment to get a second gen with a Cummins that's drivable. So that's part of the reason, and it's got a V10 in it. Remember, in the second gen Rams, up until the 24 valve high output, the 8-liter V10 outgunned the Cummins in both horsepower and torque for its entire run. This truck is a powerhouse. It will pull anything I need to do. It's got Cummins power. It's just got battleship fuel economy, which is fine. If I drive it easy, I can get 11.5 out of it. Once I fix that exhaust leak and everything, we could probably match the fuel economy of my 360 powered half ton, which gets 12.5. So that being said, this truck's actually come a long way. If you just look at these pictures of the few stages of the truck was in since I got it to now. And just to let you know, the total investment in the truck and the history of this truck is, I had once had a silver 2001 half ton with a 318 in it that I had gotten basically as payment for doing a head removal and reinstall on a 4.7 in a 3rd gen Ram. So that truck was effectively free. It just cost me my labor. Well, then down the line, this V10 truck showed up, and it was rough, as you could have seen when I first got it in the very first video on this project. And I traded that half ton even up for it. So we are at $0 just to acquire this truck. Now I probably stuck a couple hundred in it and brake lines, stuff like that, so we'll call it 200 bucks. Then, well, I had to start fixing it up because I need something that can pull. So I bought the donor truck, which is what this body come from, for $300. So we're at $500. You throw in the $600 set of tires, we're at $1,100. And any of the other work we put into it, the dash, the front end components, the leveling kit, the exhaust, I am in this truck 100%, including purchasing it for under $2,000. And this is an 8600 GVW V10 47RE with 410 gears and a Dana 60 and a Dana 70 with posi out back. So that is one hell of a truck. The engine's strong, the transmission's strong. Of course, it's 4-wheel drive. You can't find many trucks that are ready to go and at least in this good a shape. It's got some rust, but I live in Wisconsin, and the donor truck was originally from North Dakota. So I say it's pretty good. And that pretty much brings us to where we are now, which I actually really like this thing. I almost prefer driving this more than my half ton, which I never drive. because it's just got its modern horsepower in an older truck. And I love these second gen Rams, even though a lot of people will poo-poo on them because they're not that great a quality of truck. But, you know, they're tough. The frame's plenty tough. The suspension, the 4-link's not the best, but it holds up. Everything on these holds up pretty well. So there we go. I'm pretty happy with this. In the next video on this, I'll kind of leave up to you guys to decide is do we do that exhaust manifold and show you how to do it the easy way, or do we go through and I show you all the front end replacement stuff like the ball joints, the steering and all that, or do we just jump right in to making this truck even nicer by getting some patch panels there and the rockers, cleaning up the sides of the bed, knocking the dents out, and just continue to make this truck pretty nice. I mean, it's not a bad looking truck now. We can always make it better. So let me know what you think. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Go down, hit the thumbs up, and when you subscribe, hit the bell so you get the notification every time a new video comes out on any of the projects I have. Also, you can find me on Facebook at T.N.T Garage and Performance, and also on Instagram at T.N.T Garage and Performance. So I'd really appreciate if you check those out, drop a comment, something like that. And well, I guess until next time, remember, if it ain't broke, fix it till it is. We'll see you soon.